Oh, and you know the thing about chaos? It's fair.
Any GM can build a world. The good ones start with the enemy. Now, an interesting campaign build is multifaceted, with maps and gods and kingdoms, but none of it matters until you decide who threatens it. In today's video, I'm going to show you 6 of my favourite villain archetypes, each one with their own unique backstories, viewpoints, and mechanics. How you can drop them into your game smoothly and captivate your players in almost any situation. I want to start with one that will genuinely make your players hate you, but in the best possible way. A fallen ally is double-edged. It can create conflicting emotions amongst the party, confusion, distrust, and betrayal. It can be an NPC who accompanied them on part of their travels, or a previous beloved character who has died and risen via resurrection or a deity's command or necromancy. However, whilst initially pleased to see them, the party will come to find that the character has been tainted by outside forces. The best way this works is for them to have a genuine bond with the party. It can be recent or it could be at the beginning of the campaign. Either way, they were a trusted ally. Maybe your players had a companion when they were getting started, a healer to keep them alive and help show them the ropes. Let's say the NPC dies, one of the party, a sorcerer uses fireball and blew up a faction's hideout, and Henry the healer was stuck inside. Didn't quite make it out in time, but what the party doesn't know is that 10 sessions later, Henry's been resurrected by that faction's leader, who has twisted him into an ally and now knows all your secrets. This is one of my favourites because of the way it messes with the party's heads in a very specific way. It's like finding out your favourite TV show that got cancelled is coming back, but now it's got a new actor as the lead. It becomes less about can we stop this threat and adds all these extra layers. How did they come back? Why are they back? Maybe some of the group agrees with their ideals and wants to save them, and others just want to put them out of their misery. This really helps with roleplay growth, hard decision making and party bonds, because it will test them. Showing physical scars is an amazing tool to really sell the trauma and vulnerability this person has been through. It also makes for some incredible redemption arcs. This is the villain who used to sleep in the bedroll next to yours. They know your weaknesses, yes, but more than that, they know exactly which ones you're too proud to admit you have. And when that moment comes at the table where the party has to decide whether to save them or to stop them, that's when you'll know you built this one right. So now ask yourself, what happens when the villain your party created without even realizing it comes back for them? Now you know the NPC the party dismissed a while ago. They offered their help and the party said, nah, we're good. Maybe it's someone who has been around whilst the party saved the day, a big fan of their work and wants to impress or join them, only to be rejected. That neglect turns their idolization into obsession and then into hate. If you want a reoccurring antagonist that keeps coming back stronger, smarter, and more dangerous every time, this is your guy. This actually reminds me of a city guard I ran once. The party needed to get into a city on lockdown. A riot had taken place and the local casino owner, the richest man in town, had just been assassinated. They clocked the weak link immediately, a young guard at the gate, gear too big for him, slim, with that look in his eyes like he's never actually poked anyone with his sword. Rather than sneaking past, they just convinced him they had access. Party gets in. Some destruction and a few casualties later, they leave with what they came for. Duncan gets blamed for the whole thing and thrown into jail. Makes some new friends in there, breaks out, joins the Thieves Guild, starts running messages to nearby towns and then gets promoted. His armor is now worn and honestly too small, and the whole time he's keeping one ear to the wind for the group that ruined his life. It just goes from there. This archetype can also be manifested through hero syndrome, or you might know it as hero complex or savior's complex. In this case, the villain creates manufactured threats or sanctimonious theatrics so they can be the hero and become the players. I love how you can grow this weak little NPC that was dismissed into a terrifying embodiment of the void. They hide in plain sight, pretending to be the underdog we all love and root for, all while using heroics to gain the respect and trust of the NPCs the players want to protect, using them as a shield while showing the table how their arrogance and recklessness led them here. If your group thinks they can't lose or normal threats don't seem to have the same effect, this archetype will bring them down a peg or two. Now speaking of villains your party can't just punch their way through, what happens when the villain doesn't care about your party's skills, their arrogance, or frankly, them at all? What happens when an unstoppable villain meets an immovable party? You get a deterministic antagonistic force, a foe who believes their victory was sealed long ago, and nothing you or anyone else can do will stop it. This archetype is one of systematic control, rationality over rage. Only when the party can break their system will they truly become unpredictable. This is a game-ending villain, your Vecna or Strahd, but they can become railroady, especially for newer GMs, so one thing I like to do is make them agents of fate, instead of traditional boring bad guys with trivial human desires or payback-driven motives. Why not leave it up to fate? Instead of the villain knowing the outcome to every encounter or plan, they use a randomizing tool, like a coin flip, or more fittingly a d20 roll, which acts as a hand of fate. This makes the outcome unpredictable while still giving the impression the villain knows exactly what they're doing. Around one of these I think about a lot. A monk who spent his entire life training under his master in the mountains, devoted and disciplined, completely removed from the world below. Then from nowhere, the mountain takes a stray magical blast from an arcane weapon being used to defend a nearby city. The whole monastery is destroyed, nearly every monk killed, including his master. An accident. Nobody meant for it to happen. But that's exactly what makes it so uncomfortable. There's no evil mastermind to point at, no deliberate act of desperation that hit the wrong mountain. He started by eradicating that city, then he began training those willing to become pupils, using their skills to spread out to the city's allies and turning their own arcane weapons against them. And the whole time he wasn't acting out of rage. This was something colder than that. The moment that blast hit the mountain, he didn't see it as an accident, he saw it as proof that arcane power in the hands of the careless will always destroy the things that are worth protecting. From that moment, his mission wasn't revenge, it was just inevitability. Every city that falls, every arcane weapon turned against its owners, to him, was correction. He's not conquering, he's concluding something that was always going to happen. And that's what makes this archetype so hard to fight. The party can't just kill him and end it because he's already replicated himself across dozens of disciples who share the same unshakable conviction. And don't get me wrong, they do follow a code, but all the players see is pure chaos. They are calculated and meticulous, and they have standards and rules, you know? If your party tends to fall into the let's go get the bad guy rut, or you're looking for an antagonist that isn't relatable, one who can't or won't understand the players, that is your villain. This person is disgusted by the party's feeble attempts to control their destiny, especially when compared to the unfathomable vastness of the universe. So if a villain who believes they've already won keeps you up at night, try a villain who doesn't even register your players as a threat in the first place. Let's get a little weird. Sometimes villains don't have to be a person, they can be a force of nature, specifically in this case a cosmic predator. There's no drive from nature or trauma, they transcend what our narrow minds can fathom. When your players face these threats, it's like going back in time before modern man sits on the animal kingdom throne. We aren't the predators here, we're the prey. It gives the horrible feeling of being hunted by something you can't possibly beat. They can't be reasoned with, there will be no redemption arc here, my friends. They are clear, unbending, and will never beg for understanding or forgiveness. This forces the players to grow by pushing past their most arrogant and reckless beliefs. This villain archetype is incredibly powerful. It's a unique twist to what can seem like a repetitive campaign. It may not always be needed, but it can really change things up. It's a great slow burn, something that can feel like it's always been there in the background, lingering, messing with your players. When I think of it that way, it really resonates with me. There's nothing more tense than the real paralyzing fear that something is there in the dark and you have no idea what it is, what it wants, or what it's coming to collect. But it can be so much more than that. It can fit in perfectly with so many types of campaigns. It could be a creation of magical or technological design that believes humanity is merely a stepping stone to the progression of intelligent life. Maybe something crashes onto the planet. It arrives near a city, starts to speak and reach out, and treats the inhabitants as prey rather than predators. Maybe it can infect wildlife or control humans, similar to a virus or hive mind. Here's an example. Picture a town. It seems like a normal place at first. But the more the party starts looking around and speaking to the locals, they can tell something's off. You can create this through the environment, like things that don't quite line up, like walls missing doors and people walking into things inside spaces, like they knew something used to be there but it's not now, and everything's kind of distorted. It could even be physical on the NPCs themselves, like a weird eye twitch, flies landing on their eyeballs, or strange rashes on their arms and neck. Maybe the locals don't even realize they're being controlled. They just get told to deliver the food and supplies supplies to a nearby mine, and an old crypt the local kids think is abandoned and haunted. The best approach is to leave breadcrumb clues across several locations and get the party to put their detective hats on, piecing it together themselves. And it could even be part of something larger and scarier, a piece broken off and fallen into the hands of a hag that's using it to control the townsfolk. There's so many options. Whatever the use case, it can be as big or small as you want it to be, making it a universal fit for any part of your campaign. Now we've just talked about something that sees your players as prey, so let's flip that completely. What if the villain sees one of your players as the most interesting thing they've ever encountered? So what does happen if the antagonist doesn't want to destroy you but to extract your potential? They aren't looking for destruction or to rule the world, not on their own at least. They're looking for the perfect student to stand by their side, and down a little. These are excellent villains for growth in your players. These guys are a manifestation of the group's ability to improve, and it works even better if it's not the whole table but one specific person. This can be reflected in the villain's motives and class or abilities, matching who they would naturally pick to be their successor. They don't care if you're not interested. They will test the player's purpose and make them choose between their friends, family, health and dignity. This could be in the form of simple tests, or you could even use a gauntlet of sorts, a series of trials to prove your worth, save someone or win a worthy prize. These work best when the players and villains' goals align, so they're ultimately working towards the same thing. It creates this spicy, bitter, adversarial relationship that leads to mutual respect and can produce some of the best roleplay situations you'll ever have at your table. I love the change up from calculating to someone who has real conviction and sticks to it, and I've made this archetype a bit of a creep before, sending gifts to the players after word reaches them of their victories and deeds. It could be a cursed weapon covered in blood, something deeply disturbing like an eyeball, or you could lean into the player's personality and craft something twisted that fits specifically to them. As the campaign goes on, they start sending out probes, maybe assassins or former apprentices, to see how the player performs, each one getting harder and more intriguing. I've used a puzzle that the villain sent that once completely transported the players into a different plane of existence. Using detect magic, they could see scrying eyes watching them as they progressed and tried to survive and escape, all of it leading to their eventual meeting, where a true test of prowess occurs, or maybe a bend of the knee. They are bad and will be until the day they die. It helps new and even seasoned players grow in a way that few other archetypes do, and you have to change, grow and come back stronger to be a real threat to this villain. And if you go the Sith rule of two route, ultimately they kind of want you to beat them, or at least challenge them, so they can grow too. So this villain pushes players to their absolute limits. But this last one? This one's coming for the whole table, and if your players aren't careful, they'll realise the villain was right about them all along. This one to me is a bit of a combination of a few already mentioned. It's a bit of the underdog, you basically watch this NPC get eaten up and spat out by society again and again until one day they snap. This archetype exists beyond evil and good. They reflect the ugliest parts of the human condition back towards the party. It's all about making the party accomplices to the bloodshed, making them feel like their feebleness or recklessness led to this happening. Their ultimate goal is to make the table question their morality. They want to push you over the edge so you can see you are just as capable of darkness when pushed to your limit. The best way these work is by using PC's beliefs and boundaries, and it's important to set the ones that you don't cross beforehand and turning them against the party. If, for instance, your paladin stands for order, they will expose the unrest and building frustration that kind of order creates for common people. I've also used an old adventuring party member for this, or even the whole group. They were heroes who tried to save the day, but the reality of winning wasn't what they expected. The rest of their old party gets killed because the king didn't want to pay what he promised. Now they're going to show everyone, including the table, what winning really looks like when the system is corrupted. This is the perfect way to reflect the darkest parts of what actually means to be adventurers. It's possibly my favourite of these because it creates this unique moral shape to fear and literally demands narrative courage from the GM. It also means you can get out of the black and white fairy tale nonsense and bring some much needed complexity and real issues into the narrative. It opens the table's eyes to the fact that nothing is as it seems, and it brings out the best and worst in players because they have no choice in the matter. So that's all 6. But there's something I want you to remember. Villains are the engine of the table. They are the driving force of the campaign. It doesn't matter how big or how small they are. The great thing about this specific lineup is that they are multi-use cases, and you could argue that most archetypes are as well. On the surface, it's easy to think a cosmic predator is an endgame content, but you can literally start your campaign in a town controlled by an entity from another world. Your imagination is the limit, and don't forget it. So when building a world, start with a thing that wants to destroy it. Have you run any villains similar to these? How did they go? If you're players, which antagonist stuck with you the most and why? Drop it in the comments and let's get to debating. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy adventurers.